Mike McCool here in the Royal Examiner studio, and with me today is Steve Foreman. Steve is the chairman of the Warren County Democratic Party. Is that how you say
committee?
That?
We actually go by
committee now. I know
Yeah.
there's so many different names nowadays. You got to be careful you get the right legal
That's right.
name. But Steve was at the meeting and spoke at the Second Amendment meeting at the Warren County High School. And he got a lot of boos, and I don't think people really wanted to hear what he had to say. So I'm sure he cut it a little short. And but I wanted to give him the opportunity to let's talk about it and looking at it from a different point of view. So, Steve, you want to start?
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to elaborate. I did not really get a chance to talk much. There were a lot of distractions and a lot of boos. It was kind of curtailed, but I think, get my main points across. I'm not sure that they really came across as strongly as I would have liked.
Sure. But the turnout at the event, can you imagine 1,200 people showing up for anything? Regardless of what the event's about, but to get 1,200 people to show up, I thought was pretty good.
And it's good in that we've got people interested in what the goings on of the local government.
Exactly.
That is perfect. That's great.
Right.
However, my main concern is that it was emotional concerns as opposed to realistic, logical facts, and really looking at the issues.
Well, and I think too. Remember, these are only proposals. These aren't
That's right.
And that's the other thing is how to change proposals.
Right.
Is not just showing up at a meeting and doing it. So.
Well, then, frankly, there were a lot of scary things talked about. Taking the law into their own hands, militias.
Yes.
Marching on Richmond, going down to shut down Northern Virginia, which, frankly, a lot of people in this county depend on their livelihood for that. So I'm not sure how well thought out that was.
It was emotional.
It was absolutely was.
So let's talk about your side of it.
Well.
Or the points you wanted to make, at least.
Yes, the point, and I did get the points in. There are a couple statistics, but the bottom line is that the majority of folks in the country, not just Virginia, but in the country, prefer or think we should have better protections. Guns have become a public health issue, and we can't let that be ruled by emotions and attitudes. We have to look at some facts here. There's 30+ thousand people killed every year in the country. We were always told that more guns would make us safer. Well, the opposite is true. There are lots of things that could be that we could look at. Even Justice Scalia said when he was passing down the Heller decision, I think 2008, said that there need to be some limits. You can't just have open-ended. And that's kind of seems to be what people want to do. And rather than compromise and think about reaching middle ground and coming to rational decisions, they just automatically want to block any discussion about it whatsoever. And we've seen that that's a recipe for disaster. With all the gun deaths, all the shootings and homicides and suicides both. It's just a really big human health issue. And I'm not sure how much of that was the response the other night was because I identified as a Democrat.
Right.
But there's been a lot of editorials and a lot of talk about how the Democrats are under the sway of billionaires who want to control people. And I think that's totally misguided. Back from, the modern Democratic Party from FDR's time, he basically saved the world by promoting the four freedoms: freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom of speech, freedom of worship. And that kind of propelled us into the new age. And after that, we were on a more hopeful bent after they defeated fascism, and he basically led the world. So the Democrats really have a legacy of doing things to help people, make common lives better. Social Security, we have Civil Rights Act, we have Medicare, the Affordable Care Act. All these things were measures to help people, not control them, but help them, let them live better lives. It's not about control, in my opinion. Now, the other thing that we hear is that government is absolutely bad in every case, every situation. And when you look at it, we've got post offices, we have police, we have fire departments that's government too. So you have to realize. And granted, sometimes the government goes too far, no doubt.
Right. And there's
no
extremes on both sides.
There's extremes on both sides, absolutely. But I think the main thrust is that the Democrats are really concerned about public health and alleviating some of the problems. We had the gun session, a special session last July, I think it was, lasted 90 minutes. My delegate shut it down, basically, and prevented any kind of discussion to take place. And I don't think that's a realistic way to deal with this. We need to have calm, reasoned debate. Now, Roger did a really good piece, I think it was last week, about breaking down the laws. He basically, and to paraphrase him, hopefully I'll get it right, none of them were really worthy of uproar or were outrageous.
Right.
So I just think we need to...
and again, these are only the summaries
Right.
of the laws proposed.
Right.
They haven't even got into the discussion yet.
The legislator's not even in session yet. So, it's kind of premature to want to
This
turn
is
the
the
county
time.
upside down.
This is the time you contact your delegate.
That's right.
And talk about things. But maybe this gun control issue, and we use that term as a broad term, is really, I think what hurts it is when we get the politics of it involved into it instead of maybe making it a non-political issue. I think it is a philosophical issue that because here's the thing, no matter what laws we have, regardless of if we had 0 guns, criminals can still get guns.
Sure.
I mean, I think we have to agree that criminals are going to get guns regardless of what we have for laws. That's why they're criminals.
Well, and that's true. And if they don't have a gun, they'll use box cutters.
That's right.
Explosives. On the other hand,
automobiles.
Yes,
right.
we saw a spate of that in Europe recently.
Part of it has to do with our mental health that we have in this country. I mean, there's a lot of that.
Well,
and attitudes and parenting, and
however,
it's a broad topic.
However, Virginia's become a pipeline into cities up and down I-95.
Right.
You repeatedly read reports from sheriffs and police departments. Where do the guns and crimes come from? A lot of them come from Virginia because a Republican administration knocked down the 1 month a gun law.
Right.
Now you're allowed to buy whatever you
want, whenever you want.
And now that's not very realistic. How many people really are going to stockpile an endless amount of handguns or whatever in their home?
Right. Well, sometimes you read the reports where somebody had 200 weapons in their house.
Yeah.
You have to be a little mentally deranged, I think, to.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to. I know a lot of Democrats have got handguns.
Oh, sure.
And,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
They don't have 200.
Well, I grew up on a farm. A gun was a tool to us.
That's right.
We needed something to protect wild dogs, rabid animals. The occasional pheasant. We'd have a pheasant on the table back when there were still pheasants around.
Right.
But it was a tool. It wasn't a fetish and something that was beyond what it was meant to be.
Right.
I think the gun culture has taken that to the 99th degree.
Well, it's kind of like we're back in the old West again. And I think a lot of it has to do still. Maybe there's something about the disrespect we have for law enforcement in some areas. I mean, and in years, when we were growing up, age-wise, I don't think we had that issue. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I went to high school, we had gun clubs. We carried we wore hunting knives on our belt all day long, and we carried 30-06 rifles in the case down the gun club.
I was in the rifle club myself.
Well, yeah, and so what happened to that culture that we had, and if you had a pickup truck, you had a gun rack hanging in the parking lot. I mean, there was never an issue with shooting up schools or, I think so. I think it's gone beyond the gun per se into some sort of culture, mental. I mean, I don't know what it is, but
I think part of what's fed that is the fact that we've been told that more guns will make us safer. And statistics don't bear that out.
We have a gun for more guns than we have
more
people.
Guns than there are people in the country.
Yeah, that's what we hear.
Yeah. So you have to wonder where that comes from and why it's permitted. And I don't want to say permitted in that no Democrat has said that they want to take guns away, with the exception of the guy from Texas who's as you know now, on the sidelines.
Right.
Nobody is coming for guns, and that's the other thing. That's one of the driving forces, I think, behind possibly this sanctuary thing.
Right.
Nobody's going to take away guns. It wouldn't be realistic. It was a huge selling point for the gun lobby during Obama. Gun sales spiked because Obama's going to come for your guns. Well,
And
didn't happen.
I don't, and I think anybody with any common sense knows that would be an almost impossible task.
Yes.
And why? When again, 99.99% are law-abiding people and don't have an issue. I think the issue is that 0.1%, which seems to be in all parts of our society. It's that 2%. Well, our whole law enforcement functions on 2% of our population.
Yeah.
Our prison systems, it all functions on that 2% that are non-compliant.
Right.
The IRS. I mean, it's 2%. I mean, that's the numbers I always heard. So
very true.
So where do you see Warren County going? Because let's start with local. If we can, that's all we can have any issues with is local. So let's. What do you think of this?
Well,
does it do any good to be designated a sanctuary county? I don't personally see any advantage.
I don't see any advantage. It's
other than an attitude of
right, and that's doesn't have a huge bearing on everything. I mean, it's up to the courts. Whatever the state decides, and the Republicans will have a chance to weigh in on that along with the Democrats.
Right, and if it goes and here's typically what happens: if it goes too extreme one way, in 2 years they'll elect other people that'll swing it back the other direction. Right. But some people, though, I mean, when I say some people, the Democrats in the House, you've heard them make comments. Well, and the governor's really taking a hard stance. We're going to enforce the law. It's almost like fighting it. They're throwing fire, gas on the fire, so to speak. Somewhere we need to swing back to the moderate. You know what I mean?
Well, but if the majority of voters in the state prefer more gun controls, is he really being immoderate, or is he trying to reflect what his electorate says?
Well, that's true too. So we'll see. The ballot box is the answer.
That's it. Absolutely,
and I think if people don't like the way it is,
then
change it in the ballot box. I mean, because we don't realize that. Someone brought up the other day, they're talking about the marching on Richmond. I mean, it's literally a civil war. I mean, and the bad thing about it, during our real the Civil War, we were a war between the states. Now it's a war between your neighbors. And I think that's getting to an extreme that when we go down that road, we're not going to be able to go back.
Yeah, I think we probably burst the boundaries. I fear now. Anything goes as far as public discourse, it seems like.
It seems like social media, we have the anonymity of the keyboard that people make comments and do things and get people fired up that they would never say to your face.
And the big thing I see about social media is that people propagate stuff that they haven't really confirmed. They may not know where it comes from. It could be a Russian, it could be Albanian or whoever. But, a lot of people just propagate stuff without fact checking. And I'm guilty of that. I try to do it, but you can't check everything.
Right.
That you send out.
We get sucked in, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Somebody looked at one of our stories, and simple thing about the tearing the building down across the street over here. And people are making comments and questions, and someone says, well, did you read the story? It's in there, I mean, people will make comments on the headlines or a picture and never read the facts or the story on there. And someone said, I said something about the Christmas. Well, when is it? Well, the first sentence of the story tells you when it is. So obviously people, they're just, we're just not paying attention to and really are involved. We want someone to do things for us, and it's a shame.
Kind of brings me to my son's 15. He doesn't read a lot. He doesn't read newspapers at all. We keep newspapers in because I feel like the local press is a huge part of our democracy. So he's not really into reading the papers, but he does keep up on he's had the good fortune of being introduced to current affairs and government when he was going to Randolph-Macon. They had some really good teachers there that were able to explain to people how everything worked and get them involved and try and introduce some critical thinking, because I think that's probably the single hugest thing that's missing right now.
It is critical thinking. That's the thing.
People do not want to assume the opinion that they hear as opposed to really thinking it through. And the gun issue is a prime thing. More guns make you safer. Unlimited number of guns, is going to make everybody safer. How does that work? You know, it's things like that don't make sense.
Right.
So
where do
I
we go
think-
from here?
Well, I would say put down the screens, but my son, as I mentioned, he gets a lot of news from his phone.
Hopefully, now that you'll say, watch Dad on the Royal Examiner,
Yeah,
but,
maybe.
it
maybe
comes
so.
to your phone.
Maybe so, yeah.
But, we're trying to, have both sides or no sides.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's just putting the facts out there. I think people should, and what you read just because you see it, it's on the internet, must be true.
Right.
That's not really going to, we can't really use that argument.
That's not valid,
and,
no.
and it's not valid. But so you brought a whole stack of paper here.
Well,
what have we got in there? We got your facts and
well, I've got Rogers.
Oh, I
I printed
see
out
you got
Rogers.
the-
It's very good, actually. A lot of facts about gun violence. I got some notes about Scalia, but there's also an article in here about Massachusetts. They have one of the lowest murder rates in the country. They've got some common sense restrictions, including, and the red flag law is probably pretty prone to being misunderstood.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, as I understand, and interestingly, I haven't seen anything about that as proposed here in Virginia yet that I've seen. I haven't had a chance to go through everything, and we're still early in the process. But it's basically disallowing somebody to have a gun if they appear to, or if they've got bad behavior, or if they're in turmoil, personal issues. They impose a waiting period for getting a gun. There's a very strict licensing law in place in Massachusetts.
Not to deny it, but just
Right. Consider it.
Consider
Think
it.
about it, yeah. Make people, make it so that you can't walk in and buy a gun if you have a dispute with your neighbor, for instance.
Right.
You walk in, buy a gun, things could go wrong,
and they normally do.
And oftentimes
When we're
it
seeing
happens.
things on the television, we're seeing it in video games, and I watch TV or movies, and I'm looking at this, and the answer to everything is a gun.
Yeah.
We're just going to go shoot these people up here.
Well,
it seems like that's people are just, and if you see this imagery over and over and over again, it has to have an effect on you.
It's a huge part of the culture. I grew up, Roy Rogers, Gene
I
Autry,
know
all
it.
that stuff, there was always
Amazing,
guns involved.
they could shoot 500 shots, but
nobody ever
got
got killed there. Yes, that's true. You got winged, that's all. It wasn't really serious.
That's what I say. They got up and walked away, but we're not seeing that today.
Right,
I mean,
we're not. It's violence has become, well, not just gun violence, but all kinds of
all kind of
violence have
violence.
become.
Right, we're not just saying gun, but just violence in general, and just physical confrontations
Right.
with things in
Right.
our media that we seem to just.
And I think it
that.
does have a bearing on our state of mind. Absolutely, I think it does.
And we know that if bad things go in, bad things come out.
Yeah.
If good things go in, good things come out.
Yep.
So, our conscience doesn't know what's good or bad. Only it's what we train it to do.
True.
And I think we need to train ourselves, we just in our children, and we're looking at. It's a combination of a lot of issues. I think it goes beyond just what we call gun control.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably trying to be something to put a Band-Aid on whatever the real issue is, because
Mm-hmm.
we grew up for hundreds of years with no issue at all as of a country that we would know of. Of course, the other side is we have 24/7 media attention now. Even
True.
if there's anything even more than 24/7, it's instantaneous gratification of anything that happens. I mean, they tweet it out and the whole world knows. So we never had that. And that was one thing I can remember when you mentioned FDR. When there was a message from the war, it took 2 weeks before it ever got into the newspaper.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of time to develop stories and information, so that we didn't really have that instantaneous. I always blame it on when the media got embedded in Vietnam. That was kind of like I think the media has gone downhill since then.
It brought it home to people for sure.
And it's in your living room, and then all of a sudden you're seeing this 24/7 in your face all day long.
True.
It has to have an effect on
True.
our culture.
I think it
our
does,
culture has
yeah.
changed
It has.
since Vietnam.
It
I mean,
has.
I think that's and the media's got from reporting the facts to giving opinions to commentary. What happened to the nightly news? It's kind of it's disappeared.
Well, yeah. I guess it went away with Walter Cronkite being
I
the
guess.
most trusted man
I
in the
guess.
country.
That's what it is.
But look at what's happened. It comes at us from all sides now. It's not just from a few sources.
Sure,
so.
sure. That's the one thing I'd like to do when you see the videos on the Royal Examiner. We put the entire thing up unedited. You know, I cut the front and cut the back, and it goes for whatever it is. And if you're really interested and you want to find out what happened at the government meeting and how things are doing or whatever it is, there it is.
Yeah.
And there's no opinion or bias in that. It may be slanted. Roger writes a story, you know, Roger has, it might be a conspiracy there, but you can watch the video and fact check it yourself.
Yep.
You know, that's the one
Yep.
thing that you don't get in the regular newspaper, or, you get a small story, or on television, you get a 30-second sound bite, and you're going to base your whole opinion because you heard some 30-second comment from
Right.
somebody that really was biased in their reporting. So.
And that's a huge service to the community. I feel it's wonderful
people take
if
the
people
time.
have the time to do it.
Well,
That's-
I just
that's
got
the
the information from our YouTube channel, and it said we've had almost 11,000 hours of videos
Really?
watched.
Wow.
We have, and I looked this morning, we have 1,076 stories posted with videos.
Wow.
Can you imagine
Wow.
that? That's and that's in 3 years. So there's a lot of video out there, and there's a lot of what we would call fact checking. You can fact check yourself
Yeah.
and watch your local government work, because
Right.
that's really where things happen, is in
It
the
is.
local arena. And goes back to the gun control issue. I think what we can do locally will affect what happens in the state,
Sure.
which will affect what happens in the nation. I mean, common sense will eventually prevail. I mean,
Well, I hope that the county has learned a lesson from all the events in the last couple of years, and not just letting things proceed without any scrutiny. But now I think we have people that are
I think we
getting
have
more involved and
I
paying
think people
attention.
are getting involved, and we're seeing that. We'll see what happens in the next election,
Right.
if we really have more voters turn out,
Right. Right.
and we're engaging more people to
Yeah.
run for office. And I
Right.
think that's, this
We
last
had an
year,
unprecedented amount of candidates
you
this
did,
last election.
and so win or lose, if you run, that's the game. I think
Yep.
is to get out there and make your voice heard.
Yep.
And I think what we want to do on the gun control issue is let's wait and see what happens, but contact your delegate and your state senator and let your opinion
I think
be known
that's the
about
big
that.
thing that needs to happen.
Regardless of which side you're on, I think we
Yeah.
just need to, stay off the social media, and let's talk to your local politicians and your state delegates and look and research it. You mentioned Massachusetts on that, but then you look at cities like Chicago and D.C. Again, these and all the killings and shootings, but these are typically not homeowners with guns.
Right.
These are gangbangers.
And the fact is, where do the guns come from? As we talked about earlier, it comes from, off the black market. People are making money with selling a trunk load of guns.
Yeah.
So,
And where do
it's
they come? Yeah.
to me, that makes sense to not have that unchecked. I can't see where that would infringe any gun owner's rights to be limited to one gun a month.
Well, I know that they're trying to also, when you sell your personal gun, they want to know where it goes.
Yeah.
For a while, you buy them. We go register and we have to buy our weapon, but then we can turn around and sell it to
Right.
Joe Blow tomorrow, and no
Right.
one knows where that gun went to.
Or if you lose one or it's stolen, you don't have to report it. To me, it makes sense that you would. If somebody came and took a gun out of my house, I think I'd want to let people know, because I would want it to be traced back
And
to
I
me.
think that's one of the proposed
That
new
is.
laws.
It is
about,
one of the proposals, yes.
and not too extreme. I think
I think it's reasonable.
reasonable.
I
I
think
mean,
it's
you would want
reasonable.
that.
The one thing, as I mentioned, I haven't seen a red flag law, but they really do a good job of it, it appears, in Massachusetts.
It might be the one good thing they do there. No,
Well, I don't know. A lot of people like Massachusetts.
they have a lot of taxes in Massachusetts,
Well, they do, but
but they got a lot of.
They got a lot of
services.
benefits and
They
services.
do.
So
and that's. I remember somebody was using. A friend of mine went over to Sweden, and the guy was talking about his taxes. But to a local person there, they get a lot of benefits out of their taxes. So, they have a different culture and attitude about it.
My wife was working in Germany years ago for 6 months, and went over and did some touring around, and she had a problem with her foot. We actually had a doctor come to the hotel to visit her, check it out, and we didn't get charged for it. And so, that wouldn't happen here.
Right.
First of all, you wouldn't get a doctor, and second of all, you'd be billed out the wazoo.
Right.
So, there's trade-offs here. Saying all
I still
one thing.
don't want to live anywhere else.
Oh no, this is a great country. Absolutely,
Let's just make that clear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm not advocating for mass immigration or moving to Germany. I'm just saying there are other ways to do things.
Right.
Massachusetts, they take a proactive stance on the red flag laws. And talking about the community level, if the sheriff or somebody within the state or the county government has reason to suspect that you might not be stable, they can bring that up, and if it's with due process,
that's the part
they
people
can deny
forget.
that.
Sometimes they just think, well, that one person is going to make that decision.
Right. It doesn't work that way.
And there's always checks and balances. Sure. Now, again, will there be problems and issues and things slip through?
Of course.
Always.
Yeah.
The best laws I can remember, now we got this law, crime will disappear. Well, that's not going to happen. We know that
that's
isn't going to happen.
Not realistic. So.
All right, what else you got in that pile you want to talk about?
Well, just a bunch of statistics. I guess we could talk about the fact
we know your son's going to watch this, so we want to give him something that
that's
maybe
right.
he'll glean something from it. And
well, let me reiterate the one that I brought up the other night that got kind of glossed over, if I can find it. There was percentages. 88% of Virginia adults support universal background checks, including 81% of Republican Virginians. These are facts from statistics from the University of Virginia. 82% of Virginians support allowing police to remove guns from people a judge finds dangerous, including 72% of Virginia Republicans.
Well, that I know someone that happened to when we had Republicans in charge. Mm-hmm. They removed guns from somebody because they thought that there was going to be an issue, and they got their guns back. So
again, like you say, due process.
Due process. At the time, it seemed a little extreme, but when things work through it,
right. Right. Also, one more interesting stat: 58% of Virginians support a state limit on one handgun per month. Again, that might be the most egregious thing to me, is the fact that we just have a wide open policy on purchasing guns and no way to track.
It's like guns
where
on
they
demand.
Go.
Yeah. I think it's only logical to know where that weapon would go to. When it's stolen, you should report that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people
you should be responsible.
Right.
You own it. You should assume the responsibility. Another thing we heard, and we just went to a gun safety class, the one thing that people forget about, when that bullet comes out of the end of the gun, you're still responsible for where that bullet goes.
That's right.
And whether you're target practicing or whatever you're shooting, because, you might protect it and it might be on your property, but then it travels another mile or 2 miles or 3 miles down the...
Well, that's what, when I was introducing my son to using a .22, I said, you can't just look, 50 yards ahead of you.
Exactly.
You got to realize that could go for a mile.
And you're going to be responsible for that
and you're
bullet.
responsible for it, and you have to visualize the impact or the consequences.
Well, another statistic that the instructor brought up, he said 80% of the shots fired by the police miss their target. Mm-hmm. He said, and these are trained people to shoot. So the adrenaline.
Right.
And so what about someone that's not trained? And that's what I always thought. I said, if you're not trained.
Well, that is a point that I had it in my original presentation. I cut it back for time, but law enforcement, military have extensive training on weapons. But like you're saying, half the time, well, I don't know what the percentage is, but oftentimes they freeze or they misfire or they can't hit what they're trying to hit.
Exactly.
And what's going to
thinks us would be any better?
Yeah, what makes us a civilian here
that don't have any
immune
training
to
whatsoever,
that, with no training in a stress situation.
Well, that's the thing they said. Well, how many shots did you fire? 3, and the magazine was empty.
Right. You just get, it's the adrenaline thing that it makes it difficult.
It does make it.
So trained people can't properly handle it. And the other thing that you hear about is somebody rushing into a situation, they're going to be a hero, a good guy with a gun. Frankly, it does. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes people are able to protect themselves or their homes or their loved ones. But oftentimes you're mistaken if a policeman comes up
Right.
and you're brandishing a gun. He has to make a split decision
Split
there.
decision, and that's happened.
Yes, it has happened.
I know. I actually had someone in my house one time, and
Oh,
I think
wow.
if I'd have had my handgun out, I would have probably shot him because they startled me. And when that
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
if you have this thing in your hand,
Right.
but at the same time, that situation worked out okay. But
Right.
I can imagine, and it'd have been a shame to, in that particular case, to shoot somebody that really was mental.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
really wasn't going to.
Yeah.
But that might not always be the case. So
True.
you just don't know.
You don't know.
But it's a strange. None of us really want to be in that position. I think. I don't think anyone
No.
would want it, and I think some people do feel safe with their handgun under their pillow, and some people, we always joke. I'm a Barney Fife. I'm going to carry my bullet in my pocket, so I have to think before I have to stick it into the gun. Well, I think that's why Andy Griffith, he
I
didn't
think
want
so,
he didn't want
yeah,
Barney to
right.
shoot anybody.
Yes, right. I've always thought that the sound of cocking a shotgun was probably enough of a deterrent to
there is
make people think twice
Yeah,
before they.
when that 38 Special gives that muzzle blast
Yeah.
and it lights up the sky, whether you hit the target or not,
Right, right, right.
whoever's on the other side of it's going to think twice.
Hopefully, think twice. Yes.
Well, like you said,
Yeah.
I think we just need to look at our culture and see where these laws go to. But please, if you have an opinion one way or the other, let your legislators know.
I think that's
because
the key thing.
And if they don't vote the way you want, then vote in some new ones. I mean, that's really what it's about.
I'm pleased to see there's been a range of letters to the editor in the daily lately. There's been a lot of pros and cons on either side of the issues.
That's called the local media.
The local media, yes.
That's what they
all
refer
of
to.
it, yeah.
That's how the Daily refers to the Royal Examiner. They won't give us any credit.
Oh, really?
Now,
Yeah.
we'll use their name. We'll say the Northern Virginia
that's a
Daily all
shame.
day long.
That's a shame.
But
And I'm not plugging for them. I'm just saying
They
it.
do. There has been
you
some.
know.
But there's been some in the Royal Examiner. Every day we get all sorts
Yeah.
of letters to the editor. And of course, we don't have a limit.
Right.
You've had several of yours in there. And if it's 200 words or 500 words, to
Yeah.
get the message across. So
Yep.
we appreciate it. We want letters from
appreciate
the
that.
editor. And there's only been a handful that we haven't published. I think I can count on one finger, so how many we haven't published. But it's, I think people do have some sit down and think things out and write these letters you can tell the ones that are,
Yeah.
have some thought to
Yeah.
them, and almost all of them do.
Yeah.
And we appreciate the ones that do participate in that to get that dialogue, to get that thinking. It's all about
Right.
getting to think about something. If you take the emotions out of the equation and do the old Ben Franklin close, put the pros
Exactly.
and the cons and sit down
Exactly.
and look at
Exactly.
it from the facts.
Yeah.
And you'll see that there's good on both sides.
There's a dearth of that, though. People are so hardened right now, and I think one of the encouraging things that's happened in the last several years is that people are becoming more involved and more aware. Hopefully, corresponding with that, we would have people really breaking down an issue and like you say, looking at both sides. We're not necessarily there yet, maybe, but I think that's the next step that needs to happen.
Well, we just get people involved and to think.
Yeah. Well, instead of demonizing one side or the other, and that's
Let's have a dialogue.
yes. Wouldn't that be?
We might be able to
wonderful?
convince you otherwise, or vice versa.
Right. True.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and talk to me, Steve. I know there'll be some people that that'll poo-poo the whole idea.
Yes.
But I think the idea is to sit down and when you study things, there's going to be some bad things in the law. There's bad things in every law.
Sure.
And there's good things in each law.
Sure.
Let's see what they are. Let's see where they go, and to contact the people that vote on these things
Yep.
and try to get your position persuaded one way or the other.
Yep. Critical thinking is key, and instead of just a small group holding sway, we need to consider everybody's opinion, and we need to consider everybody's welfare.
It's like opinion. Everyone has one.
Right. That's right.
That's what they say. Again, thanks again, Steve. I know that you're active in the community. You've really made a big difference in the Democratic Party in Warren County.
Well, thank
and,
you.
and I've told the candidates, I said, don't underestimate these Democrats. I mean, they're growing in Warren County. I mean, there's a lot of new people
Yes.
come in from the city. and bringing your liberal ideas and things.
Every election seems like we click up a couple of percentage points.
You know,
so-
I was at a conference one time with the criminal defense lawyers. Now, as a whole, they're fairly they consider themselves very liberal. But we had a speaker come up, and they were talking about that lawyers are the most conservative people that there are. And you could hear a pin drop in the audience. That was not what they wanted to hear. And the basic answer was, you defend the Constitution, don't you? Well, then you're a conservative. And it was just a different slant on the
True.
story to think about
Yeah.
really what you're doing. You're defending the Constitution. How could you be any more conservative than that?
Yeah.
And they all agreed, yes, we defend the Constitution, but they considered themselves liberal. You know, I don't.
Yeah, it's
No, it's just it's a mindset. Is what I was getting at.
It
And
is.
I think most people and our neighbors, we just want to get to the point where we're not fighting our neighbors.
Yeah.
And
That's where we should be.
again, and we got to think about that. Do we really want to? Do we want to battle our neighbors? No, it's bad enough as it is. I don't
Right.
think we need to go down that road.
Right.
And I think that's where this thinking,
Critical thinking is key here.
And in schools, that's a subject in schools
Sure.
now. Critical
Sure.
thinking.
Absolutely.
We have to teach people to think.
Yeah.
Get the
Unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
And I
It's
tell, just
necessary
because
to-
it's on the Royal Examiner or the internet, it doesn't mean it's true. Let's dig out the facts yourself and to research it. And one thing great with the internet, you can do that now. Where
Yeah.
when we were growing up, we had to listen to our liberal professors
Yeah. Well, it's kind of
or
like drinking.
conservative professors.
It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, though. You know, there's a whole lot out there coming at us.
It is.
You have to be. That's where the critical thinking, I guess, comes in.
We
You
have this
to be able
information
to-
overload.
Right.
I think we have too much. I
Right.
think we have too much. It causes too much stress and emotion on our
does.
bodies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, thanks again, Steve. And
thank
you're
you.
welcome
Thanks
to
for the
come
opportunity.
anytime, and we appreciate you stopping in and seeing us.
Well, thank you.